Welcome to the dark corners of the internet. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today we have an incredible story that sounds like fiction, but it's real. I found it on one of the most famous Darknet forums, where they talk not only about mysteries, but also about money. Big money. Imagine this. A group of guys create a device that can connect to ATMs and withdraw money. A lot of money. A veritable gold mine for those willing to risk it all. But the more money, the higher the stakes. Were they able to get rich? Or did that risk turn out to be a disaster? Money may beckon, but the price for it can be too high. It's important to remember, everything you hear is illegal. I am in no way endorsing such actions. I'm here to tell a fascinating story, not to urge you to repeat someone else's mistakes. Follow the law, be decent citizens, and value your freedom. Now let's get started. It was around 2015. I was 17 at the time, and like many people at the time, I was actively using the Darknet. It was its own little world, where everyone was looking for something new, communicating with different people, discussing products, often homemade devices. Once I met a guy who was making various hacking devices. He offered us something interesting, a device that could be used to connect to ATMs and withdraw all the money. I, along with a few friends, decided to take a chance and chip in to buy this device. It cost us $1,500. The device itself was quite primitive: a board, a black and white screen, a few buttons, 2 batteries, and a few USB connectors. The seller even provided an instruction manual that described which ATMs it could work with and how to use it correctly. We finally received confirmation that our device was ready. In the Darknet, such things are usually transferred through bookmarks, which is when the goods are hidden somewhere in a remote location, and you get the coordinates. And so we received the coordinates, and were told that the bookmark was somewhere in the forest outside the city. We knew we had to be careful, because if we got caught, it would be more than just a fine for a trifle. It was a gloomy day, just the kind of weather when you want to hide somewhere away from people. We gathered in a group, took our GPS phones, and set off. We had to ride our bikes to that forest because there was no public transportation there, and it was too suspicious to take a taxi. We left them a few hundred meters away from the place so as not to attract attention. The forest was dark and damp after the recent rain. Wet leaves stuck to our soles and the ground was slippery. The closer we got to the coordinates, the more tense we felt. Just think, at any moment we could have been caught, or someone else could have found the bookmark earlier. We were guided by the phone. There was some old forest path overgrown with grass and moss. When we got to the place, the GPS showed that we were a few meters away from the bookmark, but that didn't mean it was easy. In fact, as soon as we got there, the real search began. We searched under the trees, between the roots, checked every bush, even picked up old stones. After about 20 minutes, we started to doubt. Maybe we were abandoned, maybe the bookmark wasn't there at all, but then one of us found it. It was hidden in a small plastic container, buried under moss near a large old oak tree. The container was closed tightly, and inside it, as it turned out, was the very device for which we had paid $1,500. Our hands trembled a little when we opened the lid and saw it, a regular board, a screen, and the 3 buttons we were told about. Everything looked so primitive that it was hard to believe it could work. After we found the bookmark, we quickly checked the neighborhood to make sure no one was following us. The silence was strange. It felt like the forest itself was watching us. We hid the container in our backpacks and quickly walked back to our bikes, nervous at every step. When we got home, we decided to test it right away in the evening. The instructions specified a specific model of ATM, NCR ATM 5000. It was an old ATM that could still be found in some bank branches at the time. We knew that this machine ran on an old Windows XP system, and if we succeeded, we could withdraw money from it without any problems. Hacking ATMs usually involved using standard tools such as screwdrivers or wrenches to open the back panel. In the case of the NCR ATM 5000, it was enough for us to unscrew the 4 screws that held the panel in place. It didn't take long. We did it quickly. After removing the panel, we gained access to the ATM's motherboard, We connected our device to it via USB cable, as instructed in the manual, and started clicking. And what would you think? We clicked and clicked, tried different options, but nothing worked. It was a complete zero. We even tried rebooting the device several times, but there was no result. After a few hours of trying, we realized that we had been scammed. They had sold us some crap that couldn't work at all. But one of our guys, the one who knew more about programming and hacking, decided not to give up. He was fascinated by the idea of a device that could rob ATMs. After our failed attempt, he started digging deeper. At first, he spent several days on the Darknet, browsing forums where ATM hacking was discussed. He was looking for any information, how ATMs work, what systems they are built on, and whether it was possible to actually access their internal operations. In the process, he discovered that most of the old ATMs, including the NCR ATM 5000 model we tried, were running on the outdated Windows XP operating system. This opened up a lot of opportunities, because the old system had many vulnerabilities that only those who were actively engaged in hacking knew about. Our friend literally fell ill with this idea. He delved into the technical documentation, looking for answers on how these ATMs work from the inside. One day, he managed to find another hacker in the Darknet who already had experience in hacking ATMs. They began to actively communicate, sharing knowledge. That guy explained to our friend the logic of how such ATMs work, their security, how the operating system communicates with payment cards, and what signals can be intercepted. In fact, it was not a simple matter. They spent nights analyzing the code, testing different concepts and hacking options. Our friend wanted to create a program that would run automatically when a flash drive was plugged into the ATM's USB port. The idea was that the software would hack the ATM security system by exploiting Windows XP vulnerabilities and allow you to withdraw funds directly from the container without any card. At first, it didn't work. He would add pieces of code, test them, and then go to the ATMs to see if it would work. Every test ended in failure. ATMs would simply ignore the flash drive, the program wouldn't run, or the ATM system would simply freeze. He would constantly return home, sit down at his computer again, fix the code, and go back to testing. This was repeated over and over again. Sometimes we laughed at the fact that he already knew all the ATMs in the neighborhood because he visited them more often than he visited stores. After several months of such fruitless attempts, his motivation only grew. He started rewriting the code completely, constantly optimizing it. He tested every new option, but again and again nothing worked. But he was stubborn. He would sit at his computer at night, exploring new ways, consulting with other hackers in the Darknet, looking for workarounds for the security protocols that stood between him and the ATM's money. Finally, after 6 months of continuous work, he finished his software, and it was no longer a device as it was at first. Now it was just a flash drive that launched the program as soon as it was connected to the ATM's system board. The whole process was automated. The program intercepted control of the operating system, bypassed all protections, and allowed money to be withdrawn. Having done this, he was 100% sure that everything would work. So, when the program was ready, we decided to test it again. He wrote down a test amount of $100 in the file where the code was. We went to the same ATM in the neighborhood. We plugged in the flash drive, and 30 seconds later, the ATM actually dispensed money. We just couldn't believe our eyes. Everything was working. It was a real shock. After we tested the flash drive and realized that the software worked, we couldn't just stop. It was just the beginning. It was clear that all the ATMs in our area were either newer and more secure, or simply different. But still, our software was customized for the NCR ATM 5000 model, and the whole plan was based on this model, which, by the way, was really rare. Such ATMs were no longer in every district, and in large cities they were being actively replaced with newer models. We realized that if we wanted to raise normal money, we would have to look for these ATMs all over the country. This is how our new operation began. We sat at our computers at night, processing the information we could find on the Darknet, researching various databases that mentioned ATM models. A hacker friend of ours had put together a whole algorithm for finding such devices through specific user reviews, technical forums, and even websites where bank customers discussed the operation of old ATMs. We divided into groups and traveled almost all over America. We rented several cars and hit the road. We drove more than 1,000 miles from one state to another, from small towns to forgotten banks on the outskirts. No one would have believed that a few teenagers would make an entire map of ATMs running on old systems. It was a kind of adventure. We spent the night in cheap motels, sometimes right in our cars, constantly on the lookout for any suspicious activity that could attract attention. We took pictures of ATMs, checked them, recorded the locations, and made a map. Every 5,000 NCR ATM we found was marked on our map, which we constantly updated. As a result, we had a whole scheme from the east to the west coast. We didn't rush into business right away. First, we gathered enough information to build a perfect plan. Each of us knew our roles, who would be on the lookout, who would work with ATMs, and who would be responsible for the escape. We calculated the route in detail, estimated the time required for each break-in, and even how long it would take to escape. When the plan was ready, we started acting. Everything worked almost perfectly. We would arrive at an ATM, plug in the flash drive, wait a few minutes, and the ATM would dispense money. But there were fewer and fewer such places left, and every ATM we found was worth its weight in gold. That's how we traveled half the country, made a map of the ATMs we needed, and got down to business. It was a long preparation, but it was thanks to this that we were able to raise real money before the old ATMs started to disappear altogether. The business went well. In a few months we raised a whopping $7 million in total, but as time went on there were fewer and fewer of these ATMs. After about a year there was no place to test the device. Then our programmer friend decided that we needed to develop a new version of the software for more modern ATMs, namely the NCR self-serve ATM model. It was a more advanced model which was basically replacing all the old ATMs. He went back to work. He spent a long time working on the code, but eventually created new software. However, it worked a little differently. Instead of 30 seconds, you had to wait several minutes. This was due to the peculiarities of the new ATM firmware, as well as the fact that it was no longer enough to simply unscrew a few screws and remove the cover. Now, special tools were required to access the inside of the ATM, as well as multi-level security to access the internal modules. The back panel, which was easily unscrewed on older models, was now protected by more durable materials and was difficult to break or open without special tools. We decided to go test it again. However, as soon as we plugged in the flash drive, we were waiting for the software to process the information. And in a few minutes, the guy who was standing guard gave us the signal to run away because the cops were coming. We ran away quickly. But then it seemed to us that it was a coincidence, and that the cops were not coming to us at all. So we decided to try again. But this time, we were going to hide somewhere and make sure that the cops were coming to the ATM. Spoiler alert, it turned out that yes, the cops were going to the ATM. It seemed like we were getting a bad luck. After all, our friend, the coder, started looking for information again, and it turned out that the problem was that the new ATMs had an automatic alarm activation. Special sensors instantly reacted to any attempted tampering, transmitting a signal to the security service or to the monitoring system. This reduced the chances of successful hacking, as the reaction time was shorter than in previous models. That is, in simple terms, the ATM alarm was activated before the software could withdraw money. Only a few times were we lucky enough to make it before the cops arrived. After a few dozen such attempts, we finally realized that absolutely all new ATMs now have protection that automatically calls the cops when someone tries to hack in, and there were no more old ATMs. The whole thing went down the drain. We could have finished with it and given up. We had enough money. We made good money while traveling around the country and withdrawing money from the few hundred old ATMs that were still left. But our programmer, who was most excited about the process, decided not to stop. He realized that there was another way to raise money, selling software on the Darknet. He knew that he had a strong card to play. Our software really worked. and he had real proof of that. We filmed most of our exploits on our phones just for fun, not even thinking that these videos would become a trump card in future sales. They showed us connecting a flash drive to an ATM and getting money in just a couple of minutes. Each of these videos was a direct proof that our software does what it promises. It was also direct evidence of our crimes. It was just honey for the police. But more on that later. On the Darknet, such things were expensive and trust had to be earned. We had everything to convince our customers. Sales went smoothly. He started offering the program for $10,000 a copy, and it wasn't an overpriced price. Everyone knew that the software worked. We didn't hide the fact that we filmed our business on our phones, and these videos served as perfect proof. The buyers on the Darknet quickly believed in the software's performance. It was enough to show a few videos and people asked for a copy themselves. Some of the buyers managed to hack a few ATMs and withdraw some money, but they were few and far between. Most people either didn't know how to use the program correctly or didn't know how to find the right ATMs. Often, the ATMs were already modernized or better protected than the ones we were hacking. Because of this, many failed. Some even got caught by the police because they didn't time it right or simply neglected basic security measures. Despite this, he had no problems with sales. The software was in demand and everyone knew that the program could really work. The videos recorded were more than convincing evidence of this. However, greed always finds a way to turn everything against you, and it cost our programmer a lot. Software sales quickly gained momentum. At first, it was a single transaction, but over time, demand grew. Rumors began to spread on the Darknet about the new software that gave access to ATMs, and more people wanted to try it for themselves. The programmer became a well-known figure in hacker circles, and his program was sold by the dozens. In a few months, it grew into a real industry. Fraudsters appeared all over America trying to hack ATMs with our software. The media was not long in coming. Articles began to appear in local newspapers reporting on a series of mysterious ATM hacks. The police tried to find traces, but for a long time they could not understand how the fraudsters were getting access to the money. Newspapers wrote about gangs traveling across the states and stealing cash from ATMs using unknown methods. This began to attract serious attention from law enforcement. They started tracking us, although it was unclear how exactly. Most likely, some law enforcement officers were involved in this scheme. Most likely, an undercover FBI agent bought a copy of the software through the Darknet. Using transactions or other digital traces, he was able to track us down. So, a few days after the deal, we were visited. Our programmer was the first to be targeted. They took him by surprise. They broke in at night when he was sleeping. His apartment was a real goldmine for agents. There was everything they needed to prove his guilt. The computers he used to write software on, dozens of flash drives, a bunch of encrypted data, and even correspondence with customers on the Darknet. All of this was just lying on his desk, with open tabs on his computer. He wasn't even given a chance to delete anything. As I found out later, the coder himself told me about it in prison because we had a lot of time there. They broke in without warning. They broke down the door while he was sleeping. The room was completely surrounded, so he didn't even have time to realize what had happened. They pinned him on the bed, broke his arms, and immediately started looking for evidence. All his belongings, from his computer to his personal records, were seized. From what I know, they found everything they needed to put him away for a long time. How was he pressured? This is an assumption because I don't know for sure. But I can imagine that he was alone, and under such pressure they could do anything to him. The FBI knows how to put pressure on such people. They probably promised a deal at first, then threatened to put him away for decades. They said he had no chance, that they had all the evidence in their hands. And in such a situation, he probably turned us in. How could he not? Although we hoped this would not happen, the situation got completely out of control. He ended up telling them everything about me and our other friend. A few days later, the FBI came to me and him. It was a night operation, just like the one with our programmer. They broke into my house, literally kicked down the door. I woke up to being dragged out of bed by force with my hands behind my back, and that was it. No one spoke to me. They just started intimidating me right away. They beat me several times, threatened to put me in prison for decades if I didn't tell them all the details. They knew a lot, but they wanted to know more, how our plan worked, where we got the money, and most importantly, where it is now. They pressured me for hours on end, constantly pressuring me psychologically and physically. The same thing happened to our friend. However, we had foreseen something. Even before we started selling software, my friend and I agreed that sooner or later we would be caught. So we prepared ourselves. We partially invested all the money we earned from hacking ATMs and selling software in crypto. Not all of it, of course. We kept some on hand for small expenses, but most of it was in crypto, in a safe place. This was our backup plan. We hid the money in a place where you can't get to it. At least I didn't split. They couldn't push me, so they didn't find out anything about my money. Now I know I have a reserve for the future when this is all over. But my friend, it's a different story. He couldn't stand the pressure. The FBI specifically intimidated him, and he got scared. He started talking. He gave away where he was hiding his money, told them about the crypto, and even showed them how to get to it. They had all the access to confirm it. But the only thing that comforted me in that situation was that he didn't turn me in. He could have split on me, but he didn't. I don't know if it was his principled position or if he just decided to cover me out of respect, but at least they didn't find out anything about my money. I'm grateful to him for that, but at the same time I realize that fear can make anyone break down. He gave everything he had, and now he probably has nothing left, and I'm left with my plan and some more money for the future. And so, we all ended up in prison together, but in fact there was not much evidence against me. The FBI knew that I was involved in the scheme, but they didn't have any hard evidence. No large sums of money, no hidden money. They knew I was involved, but because they didn't have any hard evidence, they couldn't put me away for a long time. This probably saved me. But my friend, his situation was more complicated. As I wrote earlier, under pressure, he cracked and told about his money, so there was already concrete evidence against him. The FBI knew that he was hiding some of his money in crypto and even gained access to it. However, because he cooperated and made a deal, he was given a reduced sentence. Not as much as our programmer, but not easy either. He got his sentence about 5 years. Due to the lack of hard evidence against me, I was sentenced to a relatively short term, just over 3 years. I realized that I could have gotten much longer if they had found my money or managed to bring me to justice in a full-fledged way. But in this regard, I was lucky. I served my 3 years and was released, but our software developer, he was covered to the fullest. He kept all the evidence right on his computer. He had open correspondence with customers, all the data on software sales, and even transaction records. He was jailed for a long time. For such crimes in the United States, you can get up to 20 years in prison, depending on the scale of the case, and he got more than 10. I don't know exactly how much, but it was a long sentence. He had to serve much longer. To be honest, we had a good time in prison. Not that it was a vacation, but we had our own respect among the prisoners. They knew that we were engaged in serious things, not some kind of trifling. The important thing was that we did not snitch and did not abandon our own. The convicts appreciated that. They treated us normally, sometimes even with respect, as people who earned money not with stupid schemes, but with their brains. We did not cause problems, and we were not pressured. Now I don't hold a grudge against our old friend, the hacker who turned us in. We were just kids then, and to be honest, any of us would have done the same thing in his place, especially under the physical and psychological influence of the FBI. We thought we had hacked the system, but in reality, the system had hacked us. That's the story. Risk, money, adrenaline, and in the end, ruined lives. Sometimes it seems like the Darknet is a place of unlimited opportunities. But every step in this world comes at a high price. The path the guys chose for a quick buck led them to lose everything. Remember, no matter how much easy money beckons, there is always a dark side behind it. And it is ready to devour anyone who decides to play by its rules. The Darknet may be tempting, but it's a place where nothing is without consequences. Guard your freedom, obey the law, and remember, every illegal venture ends the same way, with a ruined life and years behind bars. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Be sure to put a like if you liked it and subscribe to the channel. Also, write your opinion about this story in the comments. I was with you, Mr. Dark Web. See you in the next episodes.